We are live with Inside Scoop with Sue. And today I am with Nancy Davis Kho. And so excited to be talking to you, Nancy.
Nice to see you.
Nancy is a speaker, a podcaster, and author of The Thank You Project, Cultivating Happiness One Letter of Gratitude at a Time. So, we've been in touch over the years with you and hearing about your project and just really loving it. And so in particular, around this time of year, it seemed like a good time to check in and talk again about, what was your project? Like, how did it even come about to do this project?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and it's nice to see everybody. Tomorrow is actually the book's second birthday, so I have a toddler book now. So very, very proud of that. The book is called, the book came about, or the idea for it anyway, came about the year I was celebrating my 50th birthday. And I decided that the way I would make that big milestone birthday a little bit different from all others would be to write a letter once a week to someone who had helped, shaped, or inspired me. Those were the three words I tried to live by. And so in the January 2016, I just made a quick list of, I think I got to like 22 names of family and friends who I thought I would write to. And I figured the rest would sort itself out along the way. And I found that writing those letters every week very quickly became this thing that I looked forward to so much, because I knew that when I wrote the letter, I would feel calmer and less anxious, and I would feel really connected. And it was just like this, the reset buttons, the big red reset buttons on a hairdryer or something. That's exactly how it felt every week. Like I pressed the reset button, everything was fine again. And I talk in the book.
I want to stop you for 1 minute because
Okay.
that's so significant.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're doing something and you have no idea it's going to take you down this path where it's actually for your mental health.
None of the benefits that I got out of this book, including the fact that it became a book, did I plan for. I really went into this I'm going to write letters to people, and I like to write. I mean, that much is true. I knew I enjoy the process of writing, so I thought I would probably enjoy that, but that was about it. And one of the things that I wanted to do in writing the book, which is not a collection of my letters, because you guys don't know who I'm thankful to, and nor should you care, but it's kind of a blueprint for other people to do this themselves, because it was so effective for me. And one of the things I asked the publisher, Running Press, when I got the book deal was, I really want to put as much science in there as you'll let me, because I just wanted to understand why it was. Every Friday, I always wrote my letters on Friday afternoons, like end of the work week, into the weekend. And I would feel so good every single time. And so there's tons of research, and it continues to emerge, about why gratitude and happiness are so closely connected. And I tried to put that in the book too, because A, I think it's interesting, and B, I want readers to know this is not just me. This is not just something that I experienced. And there was a moment of, doubt I think I had when I was writing the first draft, where I was like, what if I'm a gratitude super taster? Like, what if I'm that person who just feels it more than other people? Not that I thought I was a particularly grateful person to start with, but I just was a little worried about that. So that was another part. I talked to other people who had done similar kinds of initiatives, and everybody had the same experience. I included their stories in the book. And that was why the science too, though, because I just was like, I don't want to put this out there and have some researcher say, well, that's an unusual reaction. Most people won't get that. And it was true. Like, it really is replicable.
I mean, I think one of the things we found out in 14 years at your teen is that most things, whether they're universal for everyone, they're universal for many. It's, you would not have to consider yourself special in very many circumstances.
Right. And I try never to. What's the song lyric? If you think you're special, you're probably not. I love that song. Like, that's from a Theophilus London song. Why even try?
Yeah.
I can't not go into song lyric at some point in every interview. It just happens.
Okay, well, good. Do you want to sing for us? Or
no, I don't. And you don't want that either.
Okay. So I want to hear about like your 3 favorite stories where, you put something out there and you were just really delighted.
Thank you. Oh, what a fun question. I mean, let's see. I'm gonna do, well, the first one, it sounds sad, but it's not really. But the first letter I wrote was to my dad. And my dad he was 81 the year that I was doing my letters, and a really, really dynamic, fun guy. I was very close to my dad. We all were. And he, in the most dad-like of dad-like things, he called me. I wrote letters to my mom and dad the same. I wrote them 2 weeks apart, but I put them in the same envelope because I didn't want anyone to think that, I was playing favorites. And my dad called me and he's like, "Oh, Nance, I love the letter." I framed it and hung it over my desk, which is like the most dad thing to do, right? So I live in California. My folks are in New York. And, he had that framed over his desk. Well, 6 months later, and this is the first part of the book, so I'm not really giving anything away. My dad was diagnosed with cancer, and he died 6 weeks later. And it was terrible to lose him. But there was this bit of comfort that came from knowing that I had said all the things I needed to say to him, all these specific lessons he'd taught me, these specific things I was grateful for. And he not only read the letter when he was still healthy, but literally sat in front of that letter and absorbed it. And so that was a favorite thing, because it was a comfort to me. And I believe it must have been a comfort to him to have received it. So that's the first thing.
Yeah, before you go on to the other two, I just want to say that so many times we eulogize people. And why shouldn't they hear it, right? Like you gave your father the gift of hearing it.
Yeah, exactly. The second thing is that so what I talk about in the book is that writing these letters strengthens your positive recall bias. This is what I learned in doing the scientific research, that we all have this tendency. We have both the tendency to look at negative things around us, which activates our fight or flight mechanism, and it, keeps us safe from harm. But it can be a kind of a dark place to live all the time. So the way you try to get out of that negative state of mind is by enhancing your positive recall bias, which is just looking around and noticing the good things around you. And over time, the more I wrote these letters, you end up rewiring your brain. You really are creating new neural pathways that help you stay in that more positive state of mind. And so the longer the project went on, the more creatively I was thinking about who should get these letters. And it went so far beyond the friends and family that initial list of 22. And, because I think I had rewired my brain. And at some point I was like, you know what? I could write to people who can't read the letters because they're not here. So I wrote a letter to Jane Austen, who is one of my favorite writer. And I loved writing that letter because I'm a nerd. And I was like, oh, I'd have to explain to her what this term means. So I was trying to write it to her in a way that might make sense to a person from the 19th century. I laughed the whole time I wrote that letter because I was just like, it's fun to do. And also, this idea that actually the act of writing the letter is the magic. So it's great when somebody gets your letter and frames it, or somebody gets your letter and sends you a text and says, "Thank you so much for it." But the writing is really where it matters. So I knew that even if obviously Jane Austen cannot read from her grave, but me writing that down was meaningful to me, and it was delightful. And I brought it up because over Thanksgiving weekend, I was just rereading Mansfield Park. I hadn't read that one in a while. So, and then can I give my third one?
Sure. Yeah.
This one came from the book. So there was a woman in Rochester, New York, which is my hometown, who bought the book. I don't know her. But she happened to buy the book, and she decided she was going to do this for her 70th birthday. She was going to write 70 letters. And one of the people she wrote to was the local newscaster in Rochester. Just wrote him a card and said, I really, she's a big fan. She thinks he's really good at his job. It makes her life better. He got that letter and brought it on air and read it out loud on the air and said how much it meant to him to hear from a reader who, said that he had a role in making her life better. And then he proceeded to say, well, and I'm, inspired by this letter, let me list all the people here in Rochester who I'm grateful to, and mentioned a bunch of people. They were out on Twitter saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe this newscaster is Adam Chodak. He said, Adam mentioned me. Here's who I'm grateful to. And it was like this ripple that just kept going. And one of the rings of the ripple was that the original writer, Jill, was kind enough to reach out to me and said, I thought you'd get a kick out of this clip. She emailed me and said, here's a clip of this guy talking about your book on the news, about the thank you letter. And he and I ended up connecting, and I was a guest on his show. So it was just really, I was that moment of seeing exactly what I think can be the result of this book. You write a thank you letter, somebody gets it, it prompts them to think, who am I grateful for? Maybe they write a letter, and it can keep going. And I just think we are at a place in the world, a time on the clock when more gratitude, more connection, more support for one another can be so healing. So that I just love that. I felt very lucky to be part of that story.
That is amazing. I think that we're talking here about, we talk to parents of teenagers, and oftentimes we're giving parents of teenagers advice for them to change their relationship with their teenager. But a big conversation over the last almost 2 years has been, put the mask on yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And so this to me is a story about how we live in the world, and how if we feel more gratitude, like our house is naturally going to be different, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you have teenagers.
I did. I now have 20. I have an almost 21-year-old on Christmas Day, and then my older girl is almost 24. I had teenagers when I wrote these letters, though.
So you had teenagers.
Mm-hmm. I passed through the other side, you guys. It's great.
I can confirm that. I also passed through. Do you think your kids took away anything from this project?
Well, I would say that I try hard as a writer. Nobody wants their mom to be a writer. It's not, especially somebody who writes memoir and essays from, it's not a great thing. So I try not to put expectations on my kids relative to my work, my writing. I will say that both my kids are great about writing thank you notes. They put me to shame. They get their holiday and birthday thank you notes out the door way faster than I do. Even the younger one, who's the Christmas Day baby. I'm not going to say they started writing thank you letters to people or anything like that, but I know that they felt, they understand what this work was about. And I think they are grateful people. I do think that, especially all the talking that I get to do about gratitude, I know they don't take things for granted. So I'm just, as with so much of parenting, I just try to set an example and not force it down their throats, and hope that they pick up what they need to from that. And I'm proud of my kids. I think they are, they're grateful people. So
that's a great story. Years ago, I was having I'll call it a disagreement, but really probably a full fight with a kid. And she,
what are those?
Yeah, she dismissed me with, just write about it.
It's always the threat, isn't it? I could.
Yeah, it was great.
I should say, though, I always had a policy, because I've been blogging at Midlife Mixtape since 2011, and I've shifted over to podcasting, but there's a lot of words about my family on that blog. And I always made sure the kids signed off, because I started blogging when the girls were 8 and 11. So I didn't have that period of time where I could just say what I wanted to and they wouldn't know. And I would not have done that anyway, but I always gave them veto power. And I would say, this one talks about you. And there was only one that ever got vetoed. And it was like, oh, so good. But
I guess you can't tell us.
Can't tell you. But I always felt it was more important my policy was, it's more important to maintain a good relationship with my kids than to have somebody else read the blog. So, but It's a good story. Someday, I'm sure by now I could probably get away with it.
I have a folder of a few articles I started that got vetoed. And every time I check in with a kid about the topic, they say, not yet. I'm like, well, when's the yet?
I can sympathize with that, though, because there was a story I tried to tell my mom about my late teens, something that I'd gotten away with in my late teens. And I started telling her when I was 26. I think I was married already. I was 20. I didn't have kids, but I was in my late 20s. And she went, shh, too soon. So she never heard that. She never heard that story.
That's very funny. Okay, so let's get back to your experience. And you had a story with a friend, and I think her name was Lisa, a teacher.
Yeah.
I love that story.
I just had Thanksgiving dinner with Lisa.
Ah, well.
Yeah, you want me to talk about when I went and do
Yeah.
you want me to talk about the letter I wrote her? So Lisa is my best friend from high school. We're both from upstate New York, and we both ended up moving out to the Bay Area. So I'm so lucky because she's still part of my life out here. And first of all, she was definitely in my top 20 list of names to write to because she hauled my carcass over the finish line of high school in so many ways. You know, all the days that I was crying in the bathroom because my bangs look weird, like today, she would be in there with the curling iron, fix me up, like, get out there, you're fine. And I did that for her too. We were a really good team. And so, of course, I wanted to write her a letter about particularly that period of time as a teenager when you need that. You need somebody who is going to be your, your hype squad no matter what. And I loved writing that letter. That was another one. Sometimes people ask what was the longest letter or the hardest letter to write, because sometimes you have so much good material, it's hard to figure out what to include and what not to. And that was definitely one of the more challenging ones from that standpoint. But Lisa teaches seventh and eighth grade English at a public school here in the Bay Area. And the book came out December 2019. So I was lucky. I'm somebody who got to do 3 months of promotion on my book before the world shut down. But I also am glad that the book was out in the world before the pandemic, because I think it's a book that can help people through really challenging times like the pandemic. And especially when we were also isolated, this idea of reminding yourself, cataloging all these people who still care about you, even if you have to stay 6 feet away or stay inside your house. I think that can be a powerful boost. So anyway, Lisa's teaching 8th grade last year. Of course, the school went virtual overnight. Everything was a mess. And I know for you parents of teens listening, I mean, I have so much respect for what you have been able to navigate and what you are still navigating over the past year and a half. And Lisa said, would you come on Zoom and meet with my 7th and 8th graders to talk about the project as part of their end of year celebration, it wasn't a celebration last year. These kids missed out on all these parties that they were supposed to have and all this stuff. So I did that. I came and talked with her class via Zoom about the letters and how to write them and what I included. And I started with showing them a picture of their teacher in 9th grade, which was an awesome moment for her. I probably have it right here. So I usually keep that close by. But their assignment was to write a thank you letter. These eighth graders, to close the end of the year, had to write a thank you letter. And Lisa was kind enough to share some of those with me, just so I could see what kind of writing it had prompted. And we were both so blown away. And I just got a chill thinking about it again, because what these 8th graders recognized about the places where there was still good things happening in their lives, the places, the people who still were making things better for them during a very difficult time, was profound. And there was one I will never forget. There was a boy who wrote his step grandma who said, you and I aren't even related by blood, but you are the most like me of anybody in this family. And all we do is make each other laugh. And I can't wait till I can see you again, because we will laugh and laugh. And I just thought, imagine that step grandma, wherever she is, getting that letter in the mail. How much would that mean? And then there was another one of a kid who wrote to his little brother, and he said at the end, usually I think you're so annoying, but after I've written this letter, it makes me want to go find you and give you a hug. So, I think it's a very valuable exercise, regardless of your age, to just pause and think for a second, what is there to be grateful for? Even in the midst of all this challenge, even in the midst of a dark time, there are things and people to be grateful for. And it does this work of rewiring the neural pathways to make you better at doing it again and again. It's a practice worth practicing.
I know you've said something, and I'll let you say it because I don't remember exactly how you said it, but people underestimate something and overestimate something when they decide they're going to do this.
Yeah. So thanks for bringing, I love this question. So I'm a pretty outgoing person, and at no point in my letters did I think, what if the person who gets this thinks I changed your life? Who are you? It didn't even occur to me that might happen. But then I had friends who are more introverted, and I was a camp counselor, and they breed that introversion right out of you. You have to get in there and, make everybody's having fun. But a couple of friends who I had read it said that that was a concern for them, that they would feel very vulnerable reaching out with this kind, and it is an exercise in vulnerability, because you're saying, I needed help, I needed to learn a lesson, and you were there for me. So I get that. But what so I was really glad for that feedback, because it gave me a chance to kind of figure out what the science is around that. And what I learned is that people tend to overestimate how awkward it will feel to tell somebody thank you, to write that thank you letter, and they underestimate how positive the person will feel who receives it. So there's this kind of awkwardness that holds us back from making ourselves and someone else feel better. And I do say throughout the book, you get all these great juicy benefits, psychological and physiological benefits from writing a gratitude letter, but you don't have to send them. There are no thank you note police. If you are nervous about doing that, then don't send it. But if you're on the cusp, if you're on the bubble, I would say send it, because you don't even know how much that will mean to somebody else.
Did you get letters back from any people?
Sometimes, and I felt kind of embarrassed about that, because I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to like force you to write to me. And in fact, that was one of my other early rules. And I'm glad I had this, and I talk about it in the book. I said, Nancy, you are not allowed to have an expectation of anybody thanking you back. Nobody asked you to write a thank you letter. Like, don't get in a snit if you write a letter to somebody and they never acknowledge it. And the funny thing is that it only happened one time. I wrote a letter to my friend Dawn. Actually, that's the only letter that I include in full in the book. Friend in my neighborhood. I put it inside a book that I had borrowed from her, and I gave it back to, or no, it was a book I was lending her, and I put it in the front cover and gave it to her. Well, she didn't get around to reading the book for like 6 months. And then when she opened it, she found this letter. She's like, Nancy, I'm so embarrassed. And I was like, I just thought, maybe you read it and it didn't mean much to you. And she's like, oh my God. So I do, if you give it to somebody, make sure they know you gave it to them. But I did sometimes, I would say I didn't get a ton of letters back. I got one from a doctor who I'd written to my obstetrician, took the time to write me back, which I was blown away by, because how did she have time to do that? And what she said in the letter is that she rarely gets thanked. She said, this is kind of an outlier. Most people just move on. So I was really glad I'd written to her. A lot of text. Sometimes it was just something in a hug or something like that. But it was after the book came out, I started getting more letters, which was even more embarrassing, because I was like, oh God, I hope people don't think I wrote this in order to to guilt everybody into getting letters. But it was fun. I mean, I had friends from college and grad school, in different places, who took the time to write a thank you letter to me that helped me understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end. And that's why, again, I encourage you to send them, because I treasure those letters. I mean, they're so cool, with friends saying, remember we did this? And I'm like, no, I'm 55. I can't remember anything. So it was so lovely to get letters like that.
Okay. I think about the two sides of this story, and I'm also an extrovert, but I do feel vulnerable at the idea of writing the letter.
Yeah.
And I think I'd be equally as uncomfortable getting the letter. Like, I don't think any part of this would not make
maybe
me.
I should write you one and see how it fits. I'll send
Well,
you thank you
I'm
for
just
helping
not
me
sure
spread the word.
I'm not sure we have the relationship yet that will kind of get into my soul yet, but we're going to get there. We're definitely going to get there. Anyway, I have one last story of mine. I want to hear what you think about it, if you ever felt this way. So one year I decided that every day I would do an act of kindness, not one that I would ordinarily do, but seek out something different. And I got to March, and in March I started to feel like it was perfunctory. Like I was, and I couldn't decide if that was like everything in life, where there are hurdles and you kind of live through it and just keep doing it, or was it like it loses its meaning at some point. So I was wondering if you had any experience like that when you were doing, like, 50 letters is a lot.
Yeah. Well, oh my God, now
it's backwards. It's backwards.
This is so confusing for me.
It's mirrored. Yeah.
I will say that I think there's something pretty special about the way gratitude works on your brain and your body to make it more appealing to come back to it. And I say throughout this book, like, the key is finding something that feels inviting to you. So for instance, I did not handwrite my letters because my handwriting is terrible and my hand hurts after I've written just even a short thank you note. So I typed my letters because I knew I was more likely to keep typing if I did it that way. And I did once a week. You could do once a month, like, you don't, but I do think that each time you do it and you get all these measurable benefits of better sleep and lower respiratory rate, lower blood pressure, and all that stuff, there is an appeal to coming back to it. I will also say that when my dad died, I stopped writing the letters for 3 months because I was grieving and I could barely sign my name on a check. But then I came back to it and the magic was still there waiting. So if you do find that you're running out of steam on this, I would suggest thinking about what the obstacles are. What is the thing? If it feels perfunctory, I mean, in each case, you're talking about one specific person. So it is a little different every time, which means it's not as rote as it sounds like it could be, because you are thinking about a very specific person and relationship. And I also, if you can't think of enough to fill up a letter for that person, you don't have to write a letter to that person. Like, write to the people you want to write to. There's nobody looking over your shoulder. But this is something, I mean, I stopped writing my letters. It took me till the night before my 51st birthday because I had taken that break with my dad. So it took a little longer than I expected. And then I put them away. I stopped writing until I did the research for the book. And I was like, you big dummy, why'd you stop writing the letters? So now I just write them. I don't do them every week, but I definitely still reach out and, write when I feel like anxiety coming on or stress. I know that this works.
Wow.
So, yeah.
This is the biggest comment of literally the whole half hour. When you feel anxiety coming on and you write a letter of gratitude, it relaxes you. It calms.
Yes,
It
that's
soothes
how it
you.
works.
Oh my
It does.
God. Okay, everybody listening, what a tool.
Yeah.
What a tool.
Agreed. Yeah.
That's a perfect
So I
note
wrote
to
the
end
book.
on.
It's
Yes,
easy.
get the
It's
book.
free. Well, you got to buy a stamp. That's the big cost. So.
Okay, so perfect note to end on. Nancy Davis Kho, thank you so much for being here with us. And I just think, wow, what a gift to all of us. Thank you.
Well, I hope you all. I hope that there's something for you in all this. And thank you so much for having me on, Susan. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.